For Higher Education, we are welcoming you to this seminar on editing for Krishna, learning the skill of writing better, and so that we can be understood better, more, and express ourselves clearly, concisely. Jayadvaita Maharaj is an expert. He has dedicated his life to the publishing and editing of Srila Prabhupada's books and other writings, been involved with the BTG as well. So we're most fortunate to have become his students. We'd like to welcome Maharaj.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Shri Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Namade Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavani Ashtaja Yeshatane. So I'm going to start out with two philosophical, the deepest philosophical questions. Who are you and why are you here? But we don't need, existential answers. If you can just tell me who you are and why you've come, what you do that's relevant, and why you've signed up.
Okay, yes. Hare Krishna. My name is Austin, and I'm from Houston, Texas. And I've been asked by I've been inspired with Purishan Prabhu. He's asked me to study book editing and copy editing and proofreading.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
A little louder? Okay.
And there's a microphone which can travel around.
Jay? Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay. And so he has referred me to Kaishore Mataji, who has helped me to find a program in the United States through the University of California in San Diego to study, at least academically, copy editing and proofreading. So for the last year, I've been taking this certificate course, learning many things about the editorial process, and so I'm really, really interested in learning how to dovetail that in Krishna consciousness and for Srila Prabhupada's movement. And I'm just really excited to be here. As far as most recent plans, I'm actually getting married soon, and I'm going to be residing in Mayapur. So I'm hoping to serve there as an editor. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. My name is Amanda-Vikrama. I'm a teacher. I teach physics, but I've been helping my seniors in writing some books for college students, and so I've been editing and proofreading their books. And regarding that, I had written a mail to you, Maharaj, and I had written a mail to you regarding that, and in that you mentioned that you are taking a seminar. So that is why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, my name is Harilas, I'm from South Africa, and I'm interested in coming or working at least part-time as an English editor. That's why I'm here.
Hare Krishna, my name is Bhaktadas, I'm from Amsterdam. I'm an aspiring disciple from Jayadvaita Maharaj. And I also aspire to write and do an editing, and I just came in here last minute because I heard of this course. Thank you.
Krishna. My name is Keshav Krishna Das. I'm from Delhi. And
From
Delhi. Yes.
I've heard of it, yes.
And I'm also editing some of works of Bhakti Krishna modules, preaching, Grihastha preaching seminars, and the study modules I'm editing. And Hindi Bhagavad Darshan magazine also I'm working on. So that's why I wanted to do this course so that I can better my services.
Hare Krishna. My name is Krishna Prem Rupadas. I'm from Wisconsin, Switzerland. At the moment I'm studying here at the VIH, Bhakti Golf course, so I saw a poster every day in a break. And then I realized actually it's something for me also. I like writing, so I like to improve my own writing skills.
Hare Krishna, I'm Vasanti Devidasi from South Africa, Cape Town, and I just heard about the seminar, so I decided to come. And the only writing I really do is some advertising for events on Facebook or social media, and I like writing, so also I think that editing skills could help in that department. Thank you, Maharaj.
Oh yes, phone check.
We'd like to request everybody to kill their mobile ring. Put it on silence or switch it off, please. We have a rule in the VIH that you might be wanting to be aware of. The next phone that rings has to sponsor sweets for the entire class for tomorrow. Okay? The next day. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. My name is Sylvia. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in London. I live in London for the past 10 years.
A little slower.
Okay, sorry. Shall I repeat? And yeah, my name is Sylvia. I'm originally from Brazil, but I have been living in London for the past 20 years. It's the first time I come to India and Vrindavan, and also very last minute, very fortunate to be here. I do translate sometimes. I'm a therapist. I think that being here will benefit me in many ways. I've been on Maharaj's classes many times, and you speak very concisely, so there you go. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Myself, Prem Sindhu Gaurangadas. I am serving here in the VIH, and I want to take this course to improve my own reading and proofing skills, and also it will be very helpful in my services in the VIH. For example, proofing the newsletter or writing some article. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Myself, Param Sundardas, and I'm a disciple of His Holiness Lokanath Swami Maharaj. So I'm trying to assist him in his books, book writing, and so I think he'll be pleased if I understand and learn the techniques and tricks of BBT style, because he's very keen about the standards followed by the BBT. So just trying to please him and Shiv Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. My name is Balaji Priya Devidasi. I'm serving here at the VIH. I'm interested in writing. I have done a little bit of writing in the past, some poems and articles. And I feel the editing course will bring that back out. And I may be able to offer some services in that respect. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I'm Anandamai Radha Devi Dasi. Anandamai Radha Devi Dasi. I'm serving in VIH, and I am here for this seminar to learn something from your experience, because it's better to hear from an experienced person and apply it than you commit the same mistake and learn. And I like to write, and I don't have much experience, so this is the reason why I'm here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, my name is Meenachan. I'm serving in VIH as an online administrator, and I think if I take this course, then it will really help me in internet preaching and other things. When I heard about this course, from the core of my heart, I really wanted to do this.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My name is Kartanesha Devidasi, and
there you are.
Hare Krishna. And since I've been here, I've been asked twice to help edit a book. And also I have my Guru Maharaj's books. Someone just brought them for me, so I'd like to put them into small books. So I thought this would be a good class to help me hone up on my writing.
Krishna. My name is Amanda-Vikrama. I'm from South Africa. Primarily, I wanted to take your association because I got a lot of association in South Africa, but since then I haven't heard your classes or been in your association, and also the association of the other devotees here. And also my Guru Maharaj his name is Swami, and he's very particular about writing, and many times he's corrected me many times when I wrote things to him. So I thought I could also, improve my skills in writing so that I can please him when I do write to him. And also, as time goes on, I would like to also write about my experiences in the places that I preached in the past. So I thought I'd do this course. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My name is Amanda-Vikrama, and I do like writing. And I do, from time to time, I do writing about my preaching experiences and to share with devotees. And from time to time also I do writing for the Vrindavan website, but usually I ask for editing someone else. And I think this is a nice opportunity for me to improve my writing and get experience. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My name is Amanda-Vikrama. I'm also serving at the VAG, and this seminar I'm attending with the purpose to improve my writing skills. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My name is Jayadvaita. I'm from Uzbekistan, but last 25 years I'm residing in Vrindavan. So I'm PhD in nuclear physics. So I'm PhD in nuclear physics. So, and by the order my Shiksha Guru, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, for last 10 years I'm struggling to translate his books on nuclear physics and the theory of relativity of Einstein. So it's very heavy topics, but I'm trying all my best because I promised to Maharaj personally that I will translate his books with me for last 10 years, and he's becoming my Shiksha Guru. So I'm thinking this seminar will be very useful for me to more deeper go to the topics and also clear express. The topic is already very heavy and very scientific, and I need to be very, very clear, very concise, and very deep in understanding for, especially for scientists who are not in Krishna consciousness. This is very responsible for me, and I will try all my best to use my time here in the very best way. Thank you, Maharaj. This girl, her name is Evgenia. Her English is not so well, but nevertheless, she came here. She wants to participate in your course. She very attracted by you, Maharaj, as a person. And she came to this seminar and she thinks that whatever skills she will attain here, it will be very useful in her service. She's artist. She's now serving in VHE. She's from Russia.
You may be in the wrong class. Next week I'm going to give this course in Russian.
Yeah, it will be very good. It is excellent. A lot of Russian will be very interested in this course.
I don't. The only problem I have is that I don't know Russian.
A lot of passion for writing, editing, and doing BBT in Russia is so huge. And a lot of
Actually, Jayla understands. She's just shy, but she understands it.
Okay.
Yes. And speaks also.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My name is Sri Devidasi, and I have been writing. I'm fond of writing, but whenever I am giving my writings to somebody, I always get a report and that I need to improve. So it has been my long cherished dream to learn something under your guidance. So I'm here. Thank you so much.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Obeisances. My name is Amanda-Vikrama. My husband is behind the camera. We're serving together in the Slovenian BBT.
You can speak a little louder. Or you can hold the microphone closer, or both.
We're serving together in the Slovenian BBT and doing other, whatever editing or proofreading needs to be done for any of the.
Thank you.
So we feel very fortunate to have your association.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, I'm Kishore Das. So my mind services as a Sanskrit editor and maybe translator, researcher, like that. So the language is English, the destination language, So I'd like to improve translations like that in that sense. I don't hope to be an English editor, definitely. I'm not a native speaker, but just because the seminar is conducted by yourself, I was very much inspired to take part. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My name is Amanda-Vikrama. My service is here in the VHE, and I'm very interested in taking this course. I like writing very much, and I often write articles. We are publishing a newsletter, which is always too long, so I'm hoping to learn how to write concisely. And yes, learn the standards also, because when we publish things for the ISKCON world, we would like to do it nicely and follow the BBT standards. So I'm hoping to learn a lot in this course, Maharaj. And certainly learning from you is wow, it's a wonderful gig. Thank you.
So some of you are involved with books, some of you are involved with the internet, some of you are involved with foreign language work or non-English work. Some of you are involved with communications of one kind or another. Some of you are writing and want to improve what you're writing. All good. Of course, I'm going to be talking about English editing, but a fair amount of what I'm talking about may be transferable to other languages, and some of it's not, so tough. Fair enough that I should tell you why I'm here. Prabhupada once wrote to me, continue your prescribed duty and train others. Continue your prescribed duty and train others. So this is the train others department. What is this? Why edit? These are some items from the classified ads. Auto repair service, free pickup and delivery. Try us once, you'll never go anywhere again. Our experienced mom will take care for your child. Will care for your child. Fenced yard, meals, and snacks. So, why edit? Why should we edit? Why bother to edit? Why get involved in editing?
To get the right message across.
Get the right message across.
To clarify.
I didn't hear.
To clarify.
To clarify. Excellent. And?
To sound pleasing to the ears.
Make it pleasing to the ear. Yes.
To uphold the reputation of the publisher.
Uphold the reputation of the publisher, indeed. Some other reasons?
Maybe to allow some people who actually don't write very well to still be published.
Yeah, to take people who are lousy writers and clean them up and make them fit for publication. Yes.
To go through the process again and correct it when necessary.
To?
Go through the process again.
I couldn't hear. This microphone might help.
Yeah, we should use it.
To go through the process once more.
Go through the text once more
and correct it.
And correct, yeah, to catch errors.
Yes.
To catch errors, yes. Anything else? Any other things we want to accomplish by editing? Yes?
To retain the essence and get rid of the redundancies.
Retain the essence and get rid of redundancies and unwanted stuff. Yeah. How about yes?
To capture and retain your audience.
To
Capture and retain your audience.
capture the
audience. The audience.
Capture the audience, the attention of the audience. Yeah, definitely. If you have a piece that people go to sleep on, then it's a lost cause. Yes.
To be very correct in terminology, in terms, so some people who are professional in this
To
topic.
come off correct and professional, to give an impression that you're not an illiterate.
Yeah.
Fact checking.
Fact checking, very important. The New Yorker magazine is famous for its fact checking. If some writer says that he heard the sound of the northeastern warbler, they'll, check and see whether in Maine at that time of the year there is a northeastern warbler. They'll really check anything that's a fact and see if it deserves to be admitted as a fact.
To maintain uniformity, like for us as a society.
To maintain uniformity, consistency.
Style.
Yeah, definitely.
To get the feeling across.
Get the meaning across, yeah, ultimately.
The feeling also.
The
feeling.
to get the feeling of the piece across, yeah, good.
Also, finally, this our writing is very important because we maintain somehow in this way the reputation of ISKCON.
Yeah, the reputation.
Especially in scientific field.
That's essentially what Austin was saying, that we want to maintain the reputation of the publisher or the writer or ISKCON. Yes, thank you.
The words, once written, becomes a proof in the future and evidence.
Yeah, if you want to make sure it's bona fide. There's a good point. If you're editing this kind of stuff, is it Siddhantic? Is this something upheld by authority or is it mental speculation? Yeah, very good point. Because Prabhupada said about Back to Godhead, In the future, it will be referred to as scripture, or like scripture. So therefore, nothing apart from the Siddhanta should be published. Excellent point. Anything else? Yes?
Yeah, also, to err is human, we say,
To err is definitely human.
Because, if one text is gone through by many people, not just many people, intelligent many people, then it becomes more clear, more filtration and...
By scrutiny, it becomes more clear, more paka, as they say. Good, all good. We might also want to be persuasive. Make sure that the piece is persuasive. Maybe even artful, but at least persuasive. And certainly at least bona fide. Okay. More of why we need to edit? More, you can see them all? Dog for sale eats anything and is fond of children. Man wanted to work in dynamite factory, must be willing to travel. Stock up and save. Limit one. More seriously, and perhaps more worrisome, it is recommended that Ishtagosti be convened by the Continental GBC Committees for North America, Europe, and India each year, between 30 and 90 days prior to the International GBC meeting. India may hold their meeting during the month of Kartik, with all GBC men in those areas, interested ISKCON managers and sannyasis of the continent, and other senior devotees upon invitation to hear formal reports on the year's progress from Continental GBC zonal secretaries and other leaders. Perfectly clear, isn't it? Longer sentences that can be perfectly intelligible, by the way. It is possible to write long, clear, and even beautiful sentences. This one is perhaps not among them. And this is enshrined, I might report, in ISKCON law. So these things matter. Partly because I can't make heads or tails of this, just by reading it at least. Now you have to sit down and say, what are they saying? Would you like to have a go at it? You brought pen and paper, right? You did that. I'll give you 5 minutes or so, 5 or 8. See if you can make something clear out of this.
It is recommended that an Ishtagosti be convened 30 to 90 days before the International GBC meeting by each Continental GBC committee from North America, Europe, and India each year. India may hold their meeting during the month of Kartik. All GBC leaders, interested ISKCON managers, and sannyasis from each continent are invited to hear formal reports on the year's progress from each GBC zonal secretary and other leaders.
Good. Who else would like to showcase what they do? Yes.
It is recommended that an Ishtagosti be convened by the Continental Committee for North America, Europe, and India each year. It may be held 30 to 90 days prior to the International GBC meeting, with India holding their meeting during the month of Kartik. The meeting may have all GBC men in those areas, interested ISKCON managers, sannyasis of the continent, and other senior devotees invited, so as to hear formal reports on the year's progress presented by the continental GBC zonal secretaries and other leaders.
Good. I'll pick up a couple of things I've heard. One thing I've heard already, you changed prior to before. Austin did. Good move. Prior to is stuffy. How many of you, for example, brush your teeth prior to taking a shower? Before is the common word, so very good. Another candidate. Another example, yes.
I was thinking this too long, this information in a very long way presented, and it will be just cut it into some smaller sentences. So it just if 4 sentences from this, it will be much more clear, even not changing the words. But prior is good, it's before. If you will tell before, it's better. So it is recommended that Ishtar-Goshti be convened by the continental committees for North America, Europe, and India each year. And second sentence, it will be held between 30 and 90 days before to the international GBC meeting. Third sentence, India may hold meeting during the month of Kartik. And fourth sentence, all GBC men in those areas, interested ISKCON managers and sannyasis of the continent and other senior devotees, upon invitation, will be able to hear formal reports of the year's progress from continental GBC zonal secretaries and other leaders.
Very good. This is a key technique of professional editing. You take your long sentence and cut it up into bite-sized pieces, pieces that can be digested, pieces that are long enough so that you're not reading, oh, look, see spot, none, but which is the way we learn English in America when we first learned to read. Oh, look, see spot, run. So you don't want see spot, run. On the other hand, you don't want, it is recommended, So simply cutting it up into smaller pieces can dramatically improve comprehension. Okay, I'll tell you about this. There's something called readability scales. They started coming into use, I don't know if it was like the 1940s or something like that. There are various readability scales. Those of you who use Microsoft Word can probably find someplace. I don't use Microsoft Word that much, but I think you'll find someplace that there's a readability score that you'll get. There are various systems. One's called Flesch Kincaid, another one's called the Log Index, another is the Gunning something or other. Maybe that is the Log Index. Anyway, there are several of them, and they mostly work by counting. They're stupid programs. They don't really know what you're saying, but they measure 2 things, usually, as far as I recall. Number 1, how long is your sentence, on average? The longer the sentences, the lower your readability scale. Short sentences are easier to read. The second thing they measure is the size of your words. Some of them count letters, some of them count syllables, but they're measuring the size of your words. So, for example, eating is fun could be turned into consumption of foodstuffs. It's reported to be a source of pleasure. So simple, short words and short sentences give you higher readability. On average, this is a mechanical device. It's not that just by making your words short and your sentences short, you're going to have great writing or super readable writing. Because I can get really tired of C-spot run also. But in general, and again, you don't want to take a ruler and an X-Acto knife to your writing. But in general, shorter sentences and shorter words give you writing that's more easy to read and more pleasing to read, on average. Again, these principles are not to be applied slavishly, because long sentences can be delightful, and because big words can be exactly the right words for the occasion or for what you want to get across. But other things being equal. So very, very good, Mataji. Excellent contribution. While I'm thinking of you, because you're there and you just spoke, there are some books specifically about scientific editing. I don't think I have the reference with me, but there are books particularly dedicated to scientific editing and scholarly editing in general. You might find them helpful. Anyone else want to give it a go here? Yes?
Well, I just have a small comment. Perhaps in the first sentence...
And let's give you a microphone.
Maharaj, I just thought, I don't think anyone else mentioned that, but I think in the first sentence it would make it much clearer if, the word separate Ishtagoshtis would be, it would make it clear that this is three Ishtagoshtis.
Make it clear that?
That there is it's not for
Yeah, make it
everyone.
clear that is it clear that these are separate Ishtagoshtis?
Yeah.
No, it's not clear.
Or are the Europeans, the Indians, and the North Americans all supposed to get together and convene an annual Ishtagosti?
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Someone else? Prashanto.
Recommendation. Continental GBC committees for North America, Europe, and India may convene an Ishtagosti yearly between 30 and 90 days before the international GBC meeting to hear formal reports on the year's progress from continental GBC zonal secretaries and other leaders. The area GBC men, interested ISKCON managers and sannyasis, as well as other senior devotees, upon invitation, may attend. India may hold their meeting during the month of Kartik.
Excellent. Now, there's one thing that stands out, there are many things that stand out in that piece of work. But the first one well, first of all, I love the recommendation. Boom, get it down to one word. From it is recommended that. It is recommended that. Turn 4 words into one, save 3 words. Which you can now sell on eBay. The second thing that came to my attention is that Prashanta used the active voice. Who here is familiar with active voice and passive voice? Majority, but not everyone. Okay, active voice is the usual word order in English: subject, verb, object. As in, John hit Joe. Subject, oh, I've got it, so I might as well use it, right? John hit Joe. Subject, verb, object. That's the normal way we speak most of the time. I'm going to the store, I saw Jim, the window fell on the ground, subject, object, verb. And then you can add other parts, the subject, object, verb. Normal word order. Past, that's active. Passive is
John.
Joe was hit by John.
So Joe becomes the subject, then you have the, or rather he's the, what's it, by, yeah, okay, was hit. He's the object, really. Object, verb, and then a kind of an instrumental clause. John was hit by, Joe was hit by John. It's less direct. It takes an extra word. And in a simple sentence like this, it's perfectly fine. Joe was hit by John, I can understand that in a second. But when it comes to istagosti is to be convened by the Continental GBC Committees for North it becomes stretching. Prashanta did it neatly. These committees will convene, or may convene, an istagosti. Normal English word order. I can do this, you can do that, he can do the other thing. Not, it can be done by him, and that can be done by her, and the other thing can be done by the other person, and this can be done by this and that. Normal, simple, straightforward, active voice is the default mode for communication. It's the default. Except when you want to be pretentious, when you want to be long-winded, when you're just, when you don't know what you're doing, really.
My thought was that this is ISKCON law, this is the style of ISKCON law.
This is the style of ISKCON law. The style of ISKCON law, and American law, and British law, and lawyers in general, they start getting puffy, and it's not enough to have a simple statement like the door, close the door, and it's recommended that the door be closed. You know, it all becomes more important and more, and it really works the opposite way. So much so that there's a movement called the simple language movement, if I remember, plain English movement, which wants to see in things like laws and contracts straightforward, understandable language. In fact, lawyers these days at big law schools are supposed to take some units in plain English, because number one, it's clearer. It also can be more persuasive. Parties to the contract can't complain later that everything was convoluted. I couldn't make heads or tails out of it, Your Honor, and I didn't know what I was signing. Make things clear and simple. Plus, you get trust. The person, you know, you give this to someone to sign, and the person says, yeah, I understand it, I can sign it.
Maharaj, in certain cases where we are probably translating from Sanskrit to English, we have this instrument case. So
you have instrumental case. Well, okay, we come to translation.
Maintaining fidelity.
We come to translation, where different rules apply. What makes elegant Sanskrit does not make elegant English. For example, in Sanskrit, you'll string together these bahuvrihi nouns, right? What would you say? The bull among the Bharatas said to the most chaste of the Gandharvas, and everything's expanded in that most heavenly of celestial abodes, and everything is. And you can do this in Sanskrit and really string it up. You can have I just had bull of the Bharatas, but the bull of the Bharatas, that most valiant among men, the hope of the Pandavas and the bane of the Kauravas, said to. Right? That's perfectly good Sanskrit, elegant Sanskrit, beautiful Sanskrit, rhymed and metered Sanskrit and all that. You turn that into English, it's like, it's deadening. So that's one feature of Sanskrit that doesn't. But in general, unless you really want to make be absolutely literal and make sure that people are seeing essentially your Sanskrit grammar all spelled out, the recommended strategy is turn it into good, solid English. Because my grammar and your grammar are not the same. My Sanskrit grammar and your English grammar are both meant to do essentially the same work, but they don't just translate across. So there's something that a lot of BBT translators did in the early days, and some still may do, which they grow out of, and that's literal word-by-word translation, which is, you can say, most accurate, but it's not the most accurate form of translation. It's not at all the most accurate. It's the most slavish. But an accurate translation gets the sense of what was said, makes sure that all the particulars are included, and gets it across in the target language. How do I say X from the source language in Y, the target language? It should be, the grammar doesn't necessarily translate, the grammar doesn't even necessarily matter. I really don't care what your source language grammar was. I want to know what the message was. Right? And then there's idiom too, because the way that you say something in one language may mean nothing when you translate it into the target language. I'll give you an example. In English we have a saying, between the devil and the deep blue sea. You familiar with the expression? Yes. Between the devil and the deep blue sea, which means between two equally bad choices. So if you translate into that literally into Spanish, you get entre el diablo y el profundo mar azul. That's literally between the devil and the deep blue sea. And it doesn't mean anything. If you say that to a Spanish speaker, he won't know what in the world. You have to say something like, entre la espada y la pared, between the sword and the wall. That's the Spanish way to say, between the devil and the deep blue sea. So if you just go word for word, you're lost.
But this is proverb. Proverb, what are you using? Proverb. Proverb.
Proverb. It's called an idiom.
Translating, because the essence
a proverb is different. This is, the technical term for it is idiom.
Idiom, yeah, idiom.
It's an idiom. So you want to take your idiomatic source language and turn it into an idiomatic target sentence. And you're not usually going to worry about the grammar.
But Maharaj, it is sometimes is danger if the translator brings his own consciousness and translates it in such a way that meaning is a
if you
little
just
bit like that.
assimilate the essence, you're sort of getting all, and then you have to be particular. That did the meaning get across? Were there any shades of meaning that were lost? Were there any points that got dropped along the way? A good translator has to be meticulous also. He can't just kind of get the feel of it and send it over. It has to be, especially in scientific writing, you can't do that at all. Each point is presumed to have significance. And if there are words that don't signify, okay, that's a non-significant word, we identify it as just a connective word or a little bit of like connective tissue, but it doesn't. So that's okay, I can leave that one. When I worked with Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu on Brihad Bhagavatamrita, I saw that what he was most particular about was standing up for Sanatana Goswami. That whatever Sanatana Goswami said had to be there. And the other thing he tried to do in his translations was to see that each word was somehow represented. It didn't have to be represented the same way, or in the same shape, or what have you, or the same part of the sentence, but that each word should be represented. That's not an absolute standard, but he liked to do that. He figured each word is there for a reason, we should get it across. This is a cardinal trend. It's almost a reflex for experienced editors to put things in active voice, unless there's a reason not to.
Maybe more clear in the passive.
It may be more clear in passive. It may be more spooky. Like, Joe was hit by shrapnel, which is your ordnance, your messy, what would you say? Messy gun, messy outcome of gunfire. So Joe was hit by shrapnel. Just if you say shrapnel hit Joe, it doesn't have quite the same spooky, therefore I said spooky. The other reason may be that you want the most significant word to come at the end.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Lead up to the spooky word.
Or Joe was hit by Tapan, who had a black belt in karate and was the meanest gunda in Calcutta. If you turned that around and said, Tapan, who had a black belt in karate and was the meanest gunda in Calcutta, hit Joe, that's not going to work. So when you want to have a long modifier, for example, then you might put that, you might make use of passive voice.
Maharaj, I've come across sentences where there's a modifier even for Joe.
Yeah, you can do. I can say, Joe, my dearest friend. there's nothing to stop you from modifying both. But here, particularly this sort of long, extended modifier is not going to work with active, if Joe is the subject, if Pavlam is the subject. Yes.
Now you are stressing the importance of active voice.
Active voice, yes.
Yes, that it is more clear and it's preferable to use that in writing. But I think Prabhu was mentioning that nowadays we see that everyone is so much inclined to use the passive voice, like you said about the door, recommended the door is closed at all times and something. So, and for me, I always felt comfortable with this passive voice, and I wanted to ask you now, where it comes, why it becomes so prominent nowadays?
Why does passive voice become so prominent these days? There's a lot of possible answers. My first answer would be that it has a sense of importance. You know, I just can't say this thing straight out. It comes from legalese, from the legal profession. It comes from bureaucracy. It comes from all these places. So people who wouldn't dream of speaking that way sit down with a pen and paper or with a word processor and turn out passive upon passive upon passive upon passive. So, yes.
I think it's also a property of English. We are studying English, so in English the active voice is always preferred, but in some other languages...
Other languages may have different conventions.
Different construction,
Yeah.
And also, I think this passive voice is somehow mostly used by writers, just as you said, elegant for novels, romance, or poems.
Passive voice is used by writers of romances and novels and poems? Absolutely not. No. Your best writers of novels and poems and romances and so on stick with active voice as the default mode and use passive when there's a reason to. It's absolutely
and also
the other way.
I wanted to tell this passive voice somehow this feeling of impersonalism. There is not a
let's see. Give me an Indian city. I don't want to prejudice this. Pondicherry. Okay. I don't think we have a center in Pondicherry. Right?
There is.
Because of a mistake that was made, 10 lakhs were lost in Sri Shailam.
It is
It might be perceived that an error was committed. You know, we don't want to say you goofed up. So sometimes it's done for politeness, and very often to avoid pinning the rap on anyone. Or the responsibility for something. So you read a resolution, and it's this will be done, that will be done, but who's going to do it? It not only leads to fuzzy sentences, but fuzzy thinking. This will be done, that will be done. Yeah, who's going to do it?
So it's very diplomatic.
Pseudo-diplomatic. Diplomatic or pseudo-diplomatic. You know, if I could just say things in pleasant words straightforwardly. This might be something like, because the temple president ran off with the hundi, Sri Shailam temple lost 3 lakhs.
And say it also in a nice way.
Excuse me?
You can say it active voice, but in a nice way.
I could also say it in a nice way. Because the temple president made an unfortunate misstep. Oh gosh. So that's the kind of stuff. Trying to paper over what actually happened.
Yeah.
These, those of you who've read George Orwell, yeah?
Yes.
He's quite on this topic of how you can use language in such a way as to obscure what you're actually saying.
Propaganda.
Yes, there's propaganda employs all sorts of techniques for skewing meaning, deflecting responsibility or accountability, or just turning everything into sort of a haze. Sort of a haze. We can use this kind of language to really instead of John raped Sue, John and Sue had an unfortunate encounter and experience.
What does that mean?
It doesn't mean anything, that's the point. So you save the girl's reputation, or maybe his reputation, whatever you wanted to do. They use all sorts of, you get into euphemisms, and you get into passive voice, and you get into all sorts of ways of not saying rather than saying. We have to say something. So if we can say something in such a way that we say nothing, then we win. So passive voice, not to be thrown out. It has its uses. It can be the most effective way for a sentence to work. But the unconscious use of the passive voice, the habitual use of the passive voice should be avoided. To use a passive construction. You should avoid the habitual use, uncritical use, unquestioned use of passive voice. So very good, Prashanta, that you active voiced that. Any other work on this one? I'll read you what I wrote. I think some of you did better in some ways. We recommend that the continental GBC committees of North America, Europe, and India each convene an Istagosti every year, 30 to 90 days before the international GBC body. India may do what it's going to do. All the GBC men in these areas should attend, and interested ISKCON managers and sannyasis may also. Other senior devotees may also be invited. At the Istagostis, these Istagostis, those assembled should hear formal reports and such. I think there were things in Prashanta's that were better, and everybody had something that was better than what I wrote. But I think that, it's in the ballpark. I would have worked on it for another 20 minutes or so, and it would have gotten better. And this is what editors do, by the way, they obsess. We hope that some of you are obsessive compulsive. You are good, excellent. Obsessive compulsive is the dominant psychological mode for editors. Yes?
I have a question about gender sensitivity. As far as gender
sensitivity. I have a whole thing on gender sensitivity.
Just about the GBC men, I changed it to GBC leaders.
GBC leaders, yeah. That's very interesting. I have a whole spiel, as we say, a whole rap about gender neutrality. If you go to a modern American or European university, you will not escape the severe or vigorous encouragement not to say indoctrination, regarding gender neutrality and how to achieve it. Sometimes to the detriment of the English language, and sometimes not. There are better and worse ways to do it. I'm going to speak about it. But yeah, those who are gender sensitive will look at GBC men and say, oh. Yes.
Maharaj, I don't know if it's anything to do with what you said.
Excuse me?
Editors, I've met editors.
Editors?
I've met some editors.
You've met some editors.
And they tend to...
Turn it on, turn it on.
And they tend to be critical of everything and everybody.
They tend to be critical of everything and everybody. Yeah, sounds familiar. Yes.
And when you tell, you accost them with that, they say, well, I'm an editor, so that's my job.
That's an editor, so that's my job. Yeah, that's a very funny you should say that. I think that's why Prabhupada engaged me in editing. He knew that I was a fault finder. At least those with a fault finding propensity can put it to some good use. We should try to avoid having a hypercritical eye extend to every aspect of life. Your married life will go down the tubes, of course, with that sort of mentality. Your social life, your political life, your just about everything, all of your social dealings, your interpersonal relationships, as they say, will go to hell. Your critical mentality should not be, and your writing will also go to hell. Generally speaking. I'll speak about this later, but writing and editing call for different mentalities. If you criticize each word before you get it on the paper, you may have a tough go. Anything else here? Yes?
Follow the question.
Better get the microphone first and start speaking second. Yes.
Just to add one more question to her question, there are different ways to describe one thing, or different ways to express which everyone will do differently. So then editor should not editor have that skill to actually appreciate or to see that this is not the way how I would not write like that, so I correct it. But okay, I wouldn't write like this, but that person wrote it like this, but it's also correct.
Very important. That two things come to mind here. One is that writers are sensitive. To put your words, your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions on paper is an act of courage. And when your courageous venture into the world runs into an editor who is callous, unforgiving, hypercritical, sarcastic on top of that, then I'm going to wilt. I'm just going to say, forget it, I'll never do this again. Or at least I'll never do this again with these people. So it's a responsibility of an editor to avoid crushing people. Crushing writers, crushing the people whose work they come across. In general, there may be some place where you want to say, you're just dreaming, you'll never be a writer,
But maybe in the past.
It might be said that there are some writers about it, yes. But generally speaking, we should try to encourage people. You know, if we got to Prabhupada's, imagine if Prabhupada's Bhagavatam had, back in the old days, an editor, you know, this is not proper English, and this is a juvenile expression, and this is anachronistic, and this is this, and this is that. Apart from, of course, Prabhupada was not a person to get discouraged, but the editor would have committed a lot of Vaishnava. Right? So, you want to encourage to find something good, to find something to appreciate, to find perhaps either something that's a message that came through, or some expression that was felicitous, that was well chosen, something where you can say, there's some hope for you here, or there's some, I liked that, you did something, because we all thrive on, and there's I should say, there's a book called, for those who care to look it up, The Forest from the Trees. I think that's the name. The Forest from the Trees. It's written by an editor. I think I have the details somewhere. Maybe on my list of recommended reading. It's a book by an editor about the care and feeding of writers. How to deal with your writers in a way that nourishes them. For some editors, this is the most crucial skill that they have. There's the famous example is a gentleman named Maxwell Perkins, a hyper-famous editor. He's the editor for F. Scott Fitzgerald and all those sort of people. A whole stable, in fact, of Alice Patton for Private Beloved Country for the South Africans. Quite a number of writers where he was their coach, their psychiatrist, their drug abuse counselor, their marital counselor, their financial helper, and get them across the rough spots. Of course, their writing cheerleader. So much of what he did was just keeping his writers encouraged to write, making them feel that there was something worthwhile in the project that they had. Or making them feel happy about the things that needed to be done for their writing to make it work, whether it was cutting it down or amplifying something or toning something down. The relationship is so important that when they heard it from him, they might accept it. If they heard it from somebody else, they'd say, get lost. So he discovered, as it were, and nourished a whole stable of writers who became, who are now classic names. So it was by that careful dealing with his writing. Of course, in the material world, some of these writers they're drunkards, they're lowlifes, they're all sorts of things. They're really mental cases. And so the editor has to, pull something publishable and profitable out of these people. So we don't expect to deal with such extremes in the emotional world. But people are weird, they're easily bruised, or they're high-strung, or they're very attached to the way they've done something which they conceive to be really good when you see that it's really lousy. And they have to be dealt with with some gentleness, with some sensitivity, which we should try to develop and use. So, good point. Yes.
Maharaj, I wanted to ask that, like the example of that statement.
Example of?
The statement that is.
Yeah, we're going to give you a microphone.
For example, raped Sina.
Somebody?
So, Samir raped Sina, for example. So you changed that, and instead of rape, we said that something unfortunate happened between this and this. So why do we change the statement, and in what condition we can use the first statement, and in what
When do we choose which thing to say? Its context, its purpose. If it's a legal case, I want to come right out and say that the defendant heartlessly raped this poor girl. If it's some other context, I might want to say, school context. I'd say that there was unfortunately the two students became too intimate, and such and such and such and such. Because I don't want the reputation of the school to be unduly affected, or perhaps I still care about the reputation of those two students who might have a future if they don't go into the newspapers, all of that. There's also sensitivities. There's a lot of sensitivity regarding what we say about what happens to women. That's also, in India particularly, they don't want to say things coarsely. So that comes also. There are different things. There's sometimes you don't want to use the most straightforward, most vivid word. You want something a little more gentle, a little more, a little more gentle, a little more civil, perhaps. So you have to look at what you're trying to achieve.
For example, like it's a family stuff. It's an article for a family, and where people are like, they don't want to be straightforward.
Yeah, some magazines, anything that has anything to do with rape is not going to get into our magazine. We loved your article, and we're publishing pages 1 through 14, and everything after that, take to the guys down the street, because we don't publish that stuff. They may just cut it out and say this is not for our audience. They may say, either because we're a family magazine, or children read this, or we're about happy endings and all that kind of stuff. We're upbeat. Walt Disney probably is not going to be running. There's no rape in Disneyland. So there are different reasons why you might want to excise something, just cut it out, or paper it over, or what have you. It's not that being obscure has no purpose. Sometimes it's the right thing to do.
It really depends, to me, it seems to me that it depends a lot on the readership and the audience.
It's the readership, the audience, your purpose in writing.
If you're editing an obituary, you want something that's sensitive to the family, no matter what happened or what circumstances happened.
Sometimes you want an obituary that says, that an obituary about that bitch. Sometimes, but generally, obituaries are supposed to be a little kind, a little.
Try to find the nice parts of them.
Yeah, find something good to say about the deceased. Yes. All right. Anything more before we? Oh goodness, questions right, left, and center. Yes.
I don't know about other countries, but in our country, in Slovenia, in Europe, we have a rule that in newspapers, in our country, we have a rule that
in Slovenia, there's a rule.
There's a rule that in newspapers, any incidents that are, difficult for people to digest, or reputation may be affected, it's only initials. It's not the full name.
Yeah, there are things about that also.
Censorship.
No, not just censorship, but there are, like minors, for example, even in America. I don't know how we got into rape here, but if a minor is raped, the newspaper won't publish her name.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Or show their photo.
Or show their photo. So it's, not always that no, we have to tell everything, that's our standard, nothing gets hidden here, if the truth is the truth. There are reasons for why we might leave something out or might, deal with it in a different way. Yeah.
Can the writer choose himself the editor?
Excuse me?
Can the
writer choose the editor?
Choose editor whom he likes, whom he thinks will be better?
Can the writer choose the editor?
Yeah.
Depends how much power the writer has.
And the publisher.
If the writer is a big name, this is his 4th airport novel, he's already sold 60 million, and this is his next book, you bet your boots he could choose his editor. If he's self-publishing, he can choose his editor. There are various circumstances under which one can choose one's editor. And there are lots of circumstances where one cannot. If you're submitting to a publisher, you're so grateful that the publisher has accepted your work, you're not going to quibble over who's, whether it's going to be Sally or Joan. Whoever is going to edit it, praise the Lord. So sometimes you have a choice and sometimes you don't. You submit an article to a magazine, for example, for publication. Typically, you're not going to get a choice about who's going to edit that. Okay. Shall we move on? The Writer's Art by James J. Kilpatrick. Someplace I'll give you a list of, before you go home, I'll give you a list of good books. James J. Kilpatrick is editor for an American magazine called National Review, and quite a good writer. An author functions as a kind of forest guide. His duty is to escort the tenderfoot, that means a neophyte hiker, along an unfamiliar trail. The pleasure of the hike depends to a large extent upon how often the reader stumbles. Does our reader trip over unfamiliar words? Does he bump his head on an overhanging clause? Or stub his toe on an ambiguous antecedent? If so, the reader tends to give up. It's too much, he says. And he turns to something else. This, of course, is the great danger in writing and publishing, that your reader may just give up and say, not worth it. If my life depended on this, I can read it. If there are the instructions about what the antidote is for the poison that I just suggested, I'll go through hell or high water to read this. But if you're asking me to read this for pleasure or for general information or to hear what you're riled up about, if it's too hard, too unpleasant, too difficult, I can just at any point go on to something else. Too boring also, that can be. But here particularly, stumbles, things that make me trip, things that put me in problems. These are among the hazards that cause the reader to suffer those imperceptible hesitations that characterize poor writing. It's the little uncertainty that matters, the small confusion, the modifier that isn't badly lost, but only slightly misplaced. At such pauses along the trail, The reader's eye flickers and wanders, back up to the subject, down again to the verb. The process may consume no more than a fraction of a second. But these fractions are like Everett Dirksen. Everett Dirksen's an American politician. Everett Dirksen's $1 billion here and $1 billion there. Pretty soon, said the Illinois statesman, those billions add up to real money. Imperceptible hesitations add up the same way. A cardinal principle of good writing, says Wilson Follett, is that no one should ever have to read a sentence twice because of the way it's put together. Notice its qualification. We may often want to read a sentence twice because the sentence has beauty, or punch, or wit, or because it contains a sentence twice because of the way it's put together.
You can see this practically, and you may be reading something and you have a really nice flow and you're in the story so nicely, and then you have to go back and reread it over. What did it really mean?
What did they really mean? Or not even what did they really mean, but where does the sentence go?
Yeah.
You thought that it was a statement and it turns out to be a question. You thought that this was the subject and it's really not the subject, the grammatical subject. You thought that this led here and it really led there. You thought this was an apposition and it's in series. So many ways. You're following the signs, but like Johannesburg, so South Africa's Johannesburg airport is abominable, and it's signage. It's a very good airport, it's safe and all the good things, but when you have to follow the signs, you can go mad. There are good ones and bad ones, but Johannesburg is, and I've been to many, Johannesburg is maybe the worst. You'll see something like gates 9 through 12, and there's a straight arrow, and then there's two passages, each going this, one's going right and one's going left. Or, it's something like Terminal B, and you don't know whether you're supposed to go downstairs or upstairs, right? The thing between Terminal A and Terminal B. Oh God, you can go nuts. You can go around the airport 4 times and never find Terminal B. And it's not because it's not there. It's not because all the pieces aren't in the right place. It's just the pointers.
Yeah.
You don't know where you are and where you're going. And that's not what you want to have happen to a reader going through your sentence. He should feel, I know where I am, I know where I'm going. Not necessarily in terms of your message, you may surprise him, but in terms of the mechanics of it at least, he should know where he's going. That's easier with short sentences. Short sentences are easier to manage. But that's not the only way to keep a reader on track. You can have very long sentences where the reader is with you all the way. I have a favorite one from Tom Wolfe, but it would take me too. Maybe remind me to bring the Tom Wolfe quote out. A long sentence from Tom Wolfe. Don't read Tom Wolfe. It's boga and he's too good. He's also dead, by the way. Okay, any questions here? So editing involves getting down to little details. There's broad scale work and then there's detailed work, and they both matter. Claro? Good? Yes, that brings us in fact to a question that you've already answered for me. Some of you are going to be editing other people's work. Some of you are going to be editing your own work. For a writer, a big part of writing is editing. A big part of writing is editing. So as a writer, you want to be your own editor first, before anyone else gets to you. There's another editorial task here, which I see before me, and that is evaluating what's fit to print. You may have that task, even with your own work. You may look at it and say, it was worth doing, but not worth printing. Happens. And certainly with other people's work, part of what we do, or what we may do, is decide, in or out. Is the work retrievable? Redeemable? You know, maybe it's like, wow, this is the greatest piece I've ever read. It's professional, it's clear, it's snappy, it's powerful, it's sympathetic, it's everything I ever wanted writing to be. Or maybe it's hopeless. Maybe you look at this and say, this person, he should be doing something else. You should never be allowed to pick up a pen again. Or maybe you look at it and say, well, if I cut here and I cut there and I do some repair work here and some smoothing out there, this could be a really good piece. So is the work redeemable? Does it have merit? Does it fit the purpose? Maybe this would be great as a scientific journal article, but not great as a web page or as a BTG article. Or maybe it would fit both purposes. Who's my audience? What's the purpose of my publication? What are our standards? What are we trying to achieve? Do I see some promise in this writer? We start off with a writer who we say, my goodness, I don't think I'd be, well, okay, I won't mention her name, but there's one writer who was writing for me for BTG, and I sort of prospected her and said, would you like to write about this because you're really on this topic, would you like to write about it? And said, oh yeah, I'd love to write about you contributing a column. I asked one of her column, like 2/3 of the page, and in each column she would get on her horse and ride in every direction at once. She had so much to say that, one column wasn't enough, and this and this and this and this, and she was going in every direction. But I don't know, I must have been out of sorts or something, so I was patient. And I stuck with her. And that's okay, you'll have another column next month, and you could do this and you could do that. And she became an excellent writer. So you look for that capability, that talent, or that dedication, because that's a big part of, this is not a writing seminar, but in my writing seminar, a big part of what makes successful writing is having something to say. Something that you're passionate about, something you care about, something that matters to you. It's hard to write about what you don't care about.
I have a question also about the issue of substantive editing, also ghostwriting. Writing for someone that may not be able to express it. that something that you have come across in the movement?
Ghost writing. It is a kind of editing, or a kind of co-writing, where you have someone who's really not a writer, who's not really articulate or, what's the word, persuasive, or certainly not eloquent, but maybe perhaps not even barely intelligible. Just doesn't know how to communicate well in words, but he's got a dynamite story. You know, he was the first person to arrive on the scene at the bombing of Oklahoma, or whatever it was. Or he was the, one of the guys who was on the team that killed Osama bin Laden. Or he was the guy who discovered the, whatever molecule it was that turned the universe upside down. Whatever it is. So he's got the story, and you've got the writing skills. So then the two of you get together and you get a book which is by such and such person as told to, or it's a double billed by such and such and such and such. He's the guy and he's the ghost. Sometimes it's just by such and such, and the ghost is in typical ghostly fashion, not seen. So there are different ways of doing that. Yeah.
Sometimes that level of editing is required.
Sometimes it's required. Sometimes you need to work with a person and do that sort of work, yes.
Also, this the process of taking lectures that have been transcribed and turning that into
lectures and turning speech into writing is a whole ball of wax. Yes, the written word and the spoken word are very different. Even if you look at Srila Prabhupada's books that he wrote, his writing is different from his dictation.
Which are the books that he wrote? Which are the books that he wrote?
He wrote first canto, second canto, beginning of third canto, first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita as it is, I believe. Easy Journey to Other Planets, various BTG articles, portions of Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila. So when you look at his writing and you look at his speaking, they're different. They're different. And sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if Prabhupada had written everything, but he was short of time, and the dictaphone saved so much time. But his writing and his speech were different. And now that's writing where it's intended to be essentially something written. Then you get to a speech where there's no connection with writing. It's a spoken discourse. Now you have to turn that into something for the page. Hayagriva did that with all the small books that we have. On the Way to Krishna, Perfection of Yoga.
Easy Journey. Easy Journey.
Not Easy Journey, Prabhupada wrote that, but these other little small books that came to
Matchless Gifts.
Matchless Gifts. There's a batch of little small books that we have. Beyond Birth and Death. Right.
I've heard the recordings from the Krishna book, recordings, and I wonder, was it a different way of editing?
The person can hold that question a second, because I'm right in the middle of this. So Hayagriva took various lectures, series of lectures, and edited them into books. So there was a lot of work that had to be done there because the speaker repeats himself, he wanders off to another topic and comes to another one. He, grammatically speaking, when we speak, everything's different. It's not carefully considered grammatical precision. So Hayagriva turned those lectures into books, and it was a lot of work. Your question?
Oh, my question was, how is the approach different from editing, the written word as opposed to, like, say, I've heard the Krishna book recordings, and I followed, along word for word almost, but there are some differences that I think that it seems that they made it easier for the reader as opposed to you're not listening to an audiobook. I just wondered about the differences of how
it's not just an audiobook. It's actually it's carefully edited prose spoken.
Right, spoken prose.
That's different from dictation. Raw dictation is something that's expected to be edited. So it's very different from an audiobook. To take raw dictation and turn it into, first of all, just going back a little bit, turning lectures into written stuff is really hard. And sometimes it just doesn't work. You look at it and say, that's just not an article. It was a great lecture. It was, it was so great when it was there, but it's just not going to carry over to the page. Sometimes it's just like that. Or sometimes you can. If you've got the determination and capability, turn it into a really sacco piece of writing. But it is different. Turning dictation into edited work is a lesser task because it's understood that from the beginning it's intended to be, so it's usually got more focus to it. But there's a lot that will need to be done. And we'll talk about some of what that lot is along the way. Yes.
Just a question about Srila Prabhupada's lectures. Sometimes we wish to publish a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes we wish to publish a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Is it a good idea to try to fix a bit the English, or should we just leave it as it is?
Sometimes we want to publish a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Is it a good idea to publish it as it is? Should we try to fix it? Why do you want to do it, first of all? Give me your use case.
We have a newsletter, for example, in the VIG, and we try to include almost in every issue a lecture by Srila Prabhupada, but sometimes it's really rough. Interesting topics that Prabhupada is talking about. So we have been including some lectures, not in every issue, but in many of the issues. And we stumble a bit with whether we should leave it as it is, or we published excerpts also of the lectures.
It's problematic, there's a certain, well, it's Prabhupada, and we want to have Prabhupada in every issue. That seems to be what I'm hearing, really, that we want to have Prabhupada there. I would not recommend just because it's Prabhupada we want to have it there. I would either say take those portions, because a lecture of Prabhupada is typically, he's talking about this, he's talking about that. Again, it doesn't lend itself just automatically to reading. It's not, good writing makes you want to keep reading from one sentence to the next, to the next, to the next. The lecture works differently. I keep your interest by my tone of voice, by my gestures, by volume, by all sorts of different ways that aren't available on the page. So I may repeat something loudly, still more loudly, and louder than that. And on the page, it's just, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. Maybe the one exclamation point, maybe, it doesn't go. I think it's lazy just to take a Prabhupada lecture and put it on the page. I've got the database, I can read all the Prabhupada lectures I want. Or I've got the, big audio, I've got I've got a telephone filled with Prabhupada lectures. I listen to them one after another. What do I need to pick up your VIH e-newsletter to read a Prabhupada lecture for? Why am I doing that? Now, if Prabhupada's saying something about education, the importance of our students learning this or that, and you want to pull that from Prabhupada, fantastic. Now you've got a purpose. And now I've got a focus, and now I'm interested in reading this because I'm interested in the VAHE and education, and did Prabhupada authorize what I think I might want to do and all of that. Now it's focused, now it's got power and context and purpose. Otherwise it's just, well, it's Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Well, great, yeah, I mean, it is. And whoever picks it up and reads it will benefit, but will they pick it up and read it? Why should I pick it up and read it? I've got, a bookshelf full of Prabhupada's writings. Why do I want to pick up your?
We usually select some lecture which has to do either with one of the Bhakti Shastri books or some lecture. There is some purpose behind that. Not just random.
Get your purpose clear. Why does the Bhakti Shastri group want to read this particular lecture from start to end? I suspect that there are very few occasions in which a Prabhupada lecture is going to really be what you want for your newsletter to get across a particular idea or set of ideas.
Just because it's in the written word?
Just
because it's in the written word and it's limited in that way?
Because first of all, because it's spoken, and you have the task of either, as a reader, going through this spoken discourse and finding what's important, or as an editor of turning the spoken discourse into something that's meant for the page. I just wouldn't go that way. I would look at it and say, what is it that Prabhupada is saying that matters to me here for this newsletter? Prabhupada said, I want every one of my students to learn Bhagavad Gita inside out. Just as the Christians learn their Bible, our devotees should learn Bhagavad Gita. They should study it threadbare. You've got a paragraph like that. Fantastic. This is what our founder Acharya wanted us to do. And we're putting this paragraph here because you all need to hear this. People aren't aware of this instruction, and we're giving it to you because we're the VIHE, and this is our purpose in being here, to pull out this part of Prabhupada's instructions and make them real, actualize them. That's fantastic. But just to take a lecture from January 23rd, 1975, the following is class, and put that on your pages. Why? So this gets into that editorial function where you ask yourself, not only about an author, but about a particular piece. Why is it here? Why are these words in this, are these words meant to go in the place where I'm thinking of putting them for the purpose we have in mind? So I would look at it and say, either grab focused excerpts from what Prabhupada says that really fit your purpose, or digest them yourself. Prabhupada instructed us this, Prabhupada instructed us that. Put it together in your own words, maybe with footnotes, lecture of such and such, lecture of such and such, maybe pulling a quotation in there. Now suppose I'm trying to convince you about climate change and why we have to do something about climate change. And I'm going to publish like a little newsletter about that. Is it my best shot to, publish a lecture by a great environmentalist about climate change, and for 3 pages or 4 pages? Is that really going to be the way to go? Let's say it's the most famous environmentalist of his time, but is that really going to pull me? Or is it going to be better for me to write something about, very focused, in this issue we're going to be talking about this because it's so important, these idiots over here are doing that, and those fools over there are doing that, and in the words of such and such, the most famous environmentalist of his time, a selected quotation. so that I'm really trying to give you the substance of it, rather than saying, well, here it is, wade through it, and select the essence. That's your job. That's your job as the editor. Because as a reader, I'm lazy, I'm busy, I lack interest, I don't understand the importance of any of this stuff that you want to get across to me. I don't want to give, I gave already for this or that or the other thing. And you want to grab me, you want to persuade me, or you want to engage me. Maybe it's for my entertainment, or it's because you want action out of me. Somehow or other you want to have an exchange with me. And just setting me loose in a big sea of words, even words spoken by the most exalted person, may not be the most effective way to go. And I see this done all the time, even when you're writing an essay. Okay, we're going to talk about writing a little bit. When I see essays that are, here's the author, and then here's a long quote from Prabhupada, and here's the author again, and here's the long quote from Prabhupada, and here's the author again, another quote, and then another quote, and another quote. It means the author hasn't assimilated what he's read, he or she. The author hasn't really made those words his or her own. So what they do is they put little bridges, little connective phrases, and then dump some more perfect words.
They're not confident in their own writing.
They don't have the confidence in their own writing, and the reader knows it. The reader says, this author has nothing to say. I can do this myself. I read the same books that they do. I want to know what you think, or what you understand from this, what you think the issues are about. Otherwise, I'll put your thing down and I'll go read Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll read Prabhupada's writings. Why do I need you? You're not a pure devotee anyway. So, this is the kind of thinking. I hope I haven't said anything that diminishes the importance of Srila Prabhupada or the importance of his words. I think we have that understanding of how valuable and important and powerful Prabhupada's words are. But just doing an information dump is not the way to write or the way to edit.
Our goal is for them to read it.
Excuse me?
Our goal is for the reader to actually read.
You want the reader to read. Now, there are cases, if the purpose of my publication is that it's an archival publication and I want to give you one after another, Prabhupada's words exactly as he spoke them in sequence and identified by, name, date, and place. Nothing else should be done. I shouldn't touch a word. Just put them there one after another. And if that's what I want to do, I want to read all of Prabhupada's lectures one after another, which I might want to do, then the purpose of the publication is to serve. Or maybe it's for reference. The database does just that, Prabhupada lecture, Prabhupada lecture, Prabhupada lecture, Prabhupada lecture. And I'm not going to say, Ekanath, could you put that in your own words? Aaron Ekanath's in charge of the archives. Could you put that in your own words? No, that's why we're here. We want to see what Prabhupada said. So it's a question of your purpose and how best to achieve that purpose. Yes, Maji. I'm going to stop in a minute or so, but I'll take
also, it's like the question of the audience.
The audience.
Who's the audience?
Yes, microphone.
The audience, because like we have the BTG, but it goes out in the world and people should know what Prabhupada said and who Prabhupada is. But like this magazine is to spread.
Yeah, well, Back to Godhead is a special case. I'm by no means arguing that Prabhupada's writing should not be in Back to Godhead. It's his magazine, among other reasons. But no, I'm not saying there's no occasion or no suitable place where you would want to do exactly that. Take a lecture from Prabhupada, perhaps edit it. For BTG, certainly you'd want to edit it and say, here's our founder's message. You can do that. I'm not at all arguing against that. But now Prashanta's publication, why is she doing that? Why is the Vrindavan Institute, giving me a Prabhupada lecture? Maybe you have a purpose. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe you can persuade me that this is really what, no, we got to do this. This is important. But I'm questioning it, which is what we do as editors. Whatever we see on a page, we question it. We're very questionable people. We look at it and say, why is this here? Why are we presenting this way? Wouldn't it be better to publish this or to publish that or to break this up into itsy-bitsy pieces? I'll give you an example. In my function as editor, we do a BBT conference every year in Africa, an African BBT conference. We go around to different places in Africa and put on for the devotees a day-long presentation of the BBT and its work and get them involved and so on. And part of, there are different speakers and so on. And part of what we had as part of the presentation were these slides of Srila Prabhupada with long text from His Divine Grace. Or they had audio clips, again, fairly long. And I questioned it and said, who's paying attention? Who's focusing? Who's reading through this, half a PowerPoint slide full of text? And I'm happy to say that in our latest conference, they were short, they were punchy. There was like a picture of Prabhupada with one sentence or two sentences. And you could just sit there in the audience and it had power by being focused and concise. It's not that we just said, these are all the divine bani of Srila Prabhupada. We did a search wherever Prabhupada said BBT or books, and there it is to share with you because this is coming from the transcendental world. They cut it down to each slide had a powerful message coming from Prabhupada himself. And when they showed those slides, I sat back and said, wow. That gives me something to think about. And I've been there, around for too long. In most people's opinion. So as an editor, you question, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? Am I doing it the most effective way?